Alright folks, this week's news has one big theme. The old giants are stirring. Blizzard just openly hinted that the next 30 years of Diablo won't be a slow crawl like the last 30, and that makes BlizzCon in September feel a whole lot more interesting. Meanwhile, ex-Blizzard North devs are out there trying to build a new kind of ARPG with Darkhaven. Path of Exile is about to drop Mirage, and it looks absurdly stacked. And we've got major ripples in the console world with both Sony and Xbox drama. Hey folks, this is Riker, and I dig into ARPG and gaming news so you can spend more time playing games. Timestamps below to skip ahead to different topics. Starting with Diablo news, seems we can expect a lot more Diablo games coming out in the future, and coming out quicker as well. In an interview with Variety, Diablo 4's executive producer and vice president was asked if a new Diablo title would be revealed at BlizzCon in September, since they just shared a bunch of big updates to their current games. He replied, quote, "It's kind of complicated when you're talking about titles that have been around for 20 years and people are still dedicated to and still playing and still going to get excited about new content. I'll say at a high level, I think over 30 years of Diablo, we've done 5 titles. So I would hope that over the next 30 years, we do a few more than that. Maybe we get some out faster." So Diablo 1 remake or some kind of new Diablo game altogether is becoming an increasing possibility for BlizzCon. He said 5 Diablo titles in 30 years. That's Diablo 1, 2, 3, Immortal, and 4. That does not include expansions, and that does not include remasters like Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, that said, I do think a Diablo 4 expansion is a possible BlizzCon announcement. Yes, we will have April Lord of Hatred launch, but we're going to be many months into Lord of Hatred by the time BlizzCon comes around. I do think we might get the announcement of another Diablo 4 expansion. It's possible. And in case you haven't seen it, folks, yesterday I released a video in which I went over the expansion 2 predictions I made exactly 1 year ago. Do check that out, see how many of my predictions turned out to be true and how many were way off. But it's got me thinking about expansion 3. I do think it's very likely that we will have an expansion 3, and in that case, where will that expansion take us? Where do you folks want to go next? Shall we go to the Isle of Xiansai, which is Asian inspired? We haven't seen that kind of aesthetic in Diablo yet, at least architecturally. Do we visit Arreat Crater to see how the world is recovering from the end of Diablo 2 and the destruction of the World Stone? Do we visit Westmarch to see how the great city is bouncing back from Malthael's apocalyptic reaping? What do you folks want to see? Sound off in the comments. And similarly, if we get an Act 6 in Diablo 2 Resurrected, which is seeming increasingly likely, given how well Reign of the Warlock has been received and Blizzard's expressed desire to make more content if that's what people want, where would you like to go? And where can we go and have a full act with a full act boss and everything without creating lore conflicts? Do we go to heaven and get something closer to the original Blizzard North vision of heaven that we saw in early Diablo 3 screenshots? Do we go to Westmarch? We don't have a big gothic city biome in D2 yet. Each act has a signature look to it, and we don't want to go somewhere that looks similar to what we have. Skovos may look too much like the Kurast jungles. We've already got sand in Act 2, so that rules out Kyrgyzstan. We have snow in Act 5, so the Fractured Peaks may be redundant. What do you folks think? What would you want to see? Then in some Diablo-adjacent news, Moon Beast Productions have a free demo available for their upcoming ARPG Darkhaven. This is ex-Blizzard North devs, the creators of Diablo, and it's key people from Diablo 2, led by Phil Shenk, Peter Hu, and Erich Schaeffer. They're running a Kickstarter. They've already raised $270,000 of their $500,000 goal with 20 days left to go. And if successful, this would see the game funded into early access launch. They've already been working on this game for 4 years using their own money as well as venture capital. I have a full video talking about Darkhaven. Do check out that video. Meanwhile, in an interview with PC Gamer, they were asked about the recent Reign of the Warlock DLC for Diablo 2. And Phil Shenk said, quote, "Just the fact that people are playing this 30-year-old game, that it's worth it for them to introduce new content, is amazing to me. It's super cool. I'm very proud, I guess is the word, just at the fact that it has so much legs." Later in the interview, he expanded on his thoughts about an Act 6. Quote, "Having worked on Diablo 2 and knowing how much work goes into making a new act, Yeah, that would have been amazing and awesome, but I can't even imagine how they would do that because you're retconning the story and the lore, and how does that affect everything that happened after Diablo 2? Yeah, good question. Given Diablo Immortal is meant to be that bridge between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, fill in the lore gap there, and that game is already producing a whole bunch of lore headaches. When asked how they feel about effectively competing with their own game now in 2026, Peter Hu said, quote, "There's tons of conflicted feelings there. Yeah, not gonna lie about that. We're an indie company in a way, going up against a giant, and that's a tough hill to climb." Shenk added, quote, "Yeah, we feel the pressure, but I don't hate them for it." Check out PC Gamer's full interview for yourself, folks, and check out my video on Darkhaven. Try the free Steam demo and back the Kickstarter if you want to see this game's vision come to life. In some Blizzard-related news, Blizzard revealed Overwatch Rush this week, a mobile-exclusive version of Overwatch that is played top-down. It's not a port, they basically are remaking Overwatch as a mobile-first game. And it's not being made by the Overwatch team, so it's not taking resources away from them. There's a separate team within Blizzard working on this. As per Game Informer, it is Blizzard's Barcelona team. It's going to be a free-to-play game with in-app purchases, no release date as of yet, and my main reason for bringing this up is they did not wait for BlizzCon to announce this. It's almost like Blizzard learned not to announce mobile games at BlizzCon. I honestly was expecting a mobile game announcement at BlizzCon, at least one, if not more than one, and probably a StarCraft title, to be honest. But now, if they are just casually announcing mobile games outside of BlizzCon, then they're saving the really good stuff that they know fans are going to love for BlizzCon itself. And with how much they're hyping up BlizzCon, I can't wait to see what they have in store for us in September. Then in Path of Exile news, we had the full reveal of the Mirage expansion this week for PoE 1, and it's looking to be a banger. Possibly one of the best leagues of all time. Releasing March 6th, the Mirage League mechanic will have portals appear to a side zone. When you enter the portal, you get to pick one of 3 possible options to juice the zone with player buffs or rewards, and your choice of those 3 buffs also determines which of 3 currency coins can drop in the zone. Red, blue, or green. More on that in a moment. Once in the zone, you'll find that it's a mirage of the area around the portal, an imperfect copy. Not only are the environment and the monsters copied, but also other league mechanics that had spawned nearby and their rewards. But they get twisted by the mirage in unique ways specific to this league. Then the new currency that we just mentioned. These can be used to enchant and corrupt a level 20 skill gem with a random level 1 support gem that corresponds to the same color as the currency. Of course, the league also brings a new boss and new uniques, but on top of that, we're getting a second ascendancy for the Scion, the Reliquarian, which is basically the scavenger from Frisia with powers based on unique items. GGG confirmed that with every league, they will rotate the unique items, which is a really cool way to keep the Reliquarian fresh. They're adding 20 more support gems, several new holy-themed skills and support gems, and 10 new rune grafts. We're also getting a total endgame rework with Atlas changes that should appeal to both more casual and hardcore players. The focus is really on streamlining or removing the more frustrating tasks, resulting in extensive changes to how we engage with maps without interfering with what makes mapping great. So the whole structure of the Atlas is changing. We'll be starting from the center, and each corner houses one of 4 void stone slots. The Atlas is divided into 4 quadrants and will have astrolabes that add shaped regions to a quadrant, similar to the old Shaper and Elder influence. And there's a whole lot of different kinds of shaped regions that can be added, generally based on league mechanics. Another massive change, maps no longer drop as specific areas, but just as a tier. So you can run your tier 5 map on any location in your Atlas. So if you want to obsessively just run the same location over and over and over and over, you can do that. T17 maps, as we know them, are gone. Now they will be Nightmare T16s. Cartographer chisels are gone. If you complete your Atlas, you'll get 25% item quality. Simple as that. Now, a casualty of this rework is Kirik, who seems to be gone entirely now. Keepers of the Flame is going core with improvements. Breach hives have 30% less radius. They also have shorter walls, and the walls can be destroyed. So there's less visual noise, plus we can destroy the source of our frustration. They are removing graft items, understandable, and many of the graft skills have been moved to exceptional supports, with awakened support gems being replaced with exceptional support gems. The Genesis tree stays, and we won't have to grow it from scratch, but provisioning womb gifts can no longer grow weapons or quivers, and there's been nerfs in general to the equipment items that the tree can drop, which is expected. Harbingers are temporarily gone from the game so that GGG can rework them. Seem like they'd be brought back soon. For Settlers of Kalgor, they swapped the rewards for shipping crops and ores. They added a new Karui port. Port quotas will have larger effects on the rewards, and ports now reward specific tattoos or rune grafts so you can target farm what you want. The starting skill gem for Templar is being changed now to Holy Strike, and the support is now Hallow support. Fossils will now only come from Delve, which is bound to have huge ramifications in the economy. If you delve, you'll be rich, and many people will just never get fossils now. Now, one major nerf happening is that the inherent energy shield we get from intelligence is being cut in half. I wonder how this is going to affect the meta. Could be that intelligence stacking may be more prominent now. Now, on top of all that, they're also adding quality of life updates to the currency exchange, and elsewhere, they're also improving the campaign experience by adding a ton of secret things you can run into while playing the campaign that'll grant rewards that are worth chasing. Overall, this expansion just feels like a huge win for the community and a promising sign for the future of PoE 1. The Q&A with Ziggy D just further reinforced this, with Octavian doing a great job answering questions and just generally instilling confidence. Mark seemed more excited than he's been in a while, and the fact that these two come from places of being fans and players, and they bring that perspective and they know what it feels like when the community overwhelmingly feels a certain way about a system. If it's not good enough, they know what they need to do. There's so many reworks in Mirage, things tossed away or redone because they were unpopular. And one thing GGG has always done and continues to do is take risks. And that's what has allowed them to excel. Overall, it's clear that GGG is still very invested in PoE 1. Maybe they dialed things back to get PoE 2 into early access, but now they are full throttle back on supporting PoE 1. There's no worry anymore about PoE 2 killing PoE 1. And Mark said they're actively hiring for PoE 1, with Octavian confirming that if he tells Mark they need more people, Mark will hire more people. Then some quick Resident Evil news. Resident Evil Requiem released this week to great critic reviews. On OpenCritic, it has a top critic average score of 88 out of 100, with 95% of critics recommending the game. And the PC performance is apparently great as well. On Metacritic, Requiem is the highest rated Resident Evil game since Resident Evil 4 in 2005. And while Resident Evil 6 was a misstep, ever since Resident Evil 7, Capcom has been on a hot streak with Resident Evil. And honestly, they've been on a hot streak just in general, but that's aside from things. Resident Evil is a 30-year-old franchise that has survived the test of time. It's been adapted into Hollywood films. I mean, it's not just Capcom's best-selling franchise. It basically established the survival horror genre. Then in some Grim Dawn news, in celebration of the game's 10-year anniversary, we got some details on what to expect in the lead-up to the next expansion, Fangs of Astrakarn. The expansion is going to increase the size of the playable world by 76%. It's almost doubling the size. This is going to be an enormous expansion. It is 170% as big as the Ashes of Malmuth expansion, and 223% as big as Forgotten Gods. Now, on top of just the world itself getting bigger, we're getting over 60 new bosses and mini-bosses, over 370 new unique items, and 116 monster and frequent items. They're adding a new endgame mode, Ascended mode, which you unlock once you hit level 100 as a new difficulty mode. It adds a number of new mechanics to spice up the campaign, turning the campaign into the third pillar of Grim Dawn's endgame. There seems to be content juicing mechanics involved in this, where you can choose how to increase challenge and reward. On top of that, there's the new Mastery, of course, which brings shapeshifting into the game. And Fangs of Astrakarn is in its final stretch of development. Still no release date, but some are speculating as soon as the first half of this year. Let's play it safe and hope we get it by Christmas. But before we get the expansion, a free update to the base game will introduce a modern, scalable UI, an overhauled stash, and even more surprises. It's just great to see this game still so supported by the devs. It was one of the top ARPGs of the 2010s, and with the new expansion breathing new life into it, its legacy will endure even longer. You can check out my video about Grim Dawn over here if you haven't seen it. Then in some Sony news, it is the opinion of well-connected industry insider Jason Schreier that Sony may be backing away from releasing PC ports of their exclusive single-player titles. He stated this on the Triple Click podcast and later clarified on the Reset Era forum that this was not just speculation on his part and that he's working on an article about this. Now, at first, this seems surprising, even unbelievable. Sony has made billions of dollars from their recent PC ports, which have been very well received. $2.5 billion over 4 years. Why stop? Do they not like money? Well, to put into context the $2.5 billion, their PC ports amount to just about 2 to 3% of their yearly revenue. But still, money is money, right? Sure, but what's the real cost of releasing these ports? Microsoft went ahead and did the consumer-friendly thing by releasing all their games on PC on day one. That's great for us, but how well has that worked out for Xbox as a business? Their console sales have been tanking. Turns out when you don't need to buy an Xbox to play Xbox games, you don't buy an Xbox. By owning a PC and a PlayStation, you're able to play PC-only games, Xbox exclusives, and PlayStation exclusives. So now Sony sees that Xbox is floundering and says, well, we don't want that to happen to us. Now, some gamers hold off on buying a PlayStation or buying games on PlayStation because they figure, I can wait a couple years, it's going to come to PC as a port. But if they know the game will never come to PC, and the only way to experience the game is on PlayStation, and especially knowing now that they don't need to buy an Xbox, they can just play Xbox games on PC, well, that's going to help convince them to buy that PlayStation. And I know some of you will refuse to buy a PlayStation on principle, no matter what. That's great. Don't reward anti-consumer strategies. But most people won't care. And they're going to buy the PlayStation. Because it's not just the sale of that one game that Sony wants to make. Sony's first-party AAA titles are its gateway into getting you to buy the PlayStation, after which you're going to spend money in the PlayStation Store on any other number of third-party titles, of which PlayStation gets their cut. Sony doesn't want to release their games on Steam, where Steam gets their cut. Sony wants you buying games from their Steam, the PlayStation Store. And you know, maybe the argument can even be made that this isn't just an anti-consumer practice. Maybe it's just doing what you gotta do to survive as a console. Because now that consoles are basically just pre-built PCs, why do you gotta own a bunch of different PCs if all games can just run on your home PC? What value does having a PC with a PlayStation logo on it really provide? At this point, the only value is access to exclusives. Now, you can also add into this argument the fact that the next Xbox is being marketed as a machine that will be able to run Steam. So now we have the complicating factor that Sony sees, oh crap, if our games are on Steam and the next Xbox can run Steam, then the next Xbox can run our PC ports. And we don't want that, because if we wanted that, then we would have just released our games on Xbox to begin with. So altogether, this sucks for us. The only real loser in the console wars is the consumer. And Xbox. And speaking of Xbox, in a follow-up to last week's Xbox news regarding Xbox boss Phil Spencer retiring and the subsequent resignation of President Sarah Bond, well, we had theorized that Sarah Bond had quit in response to not being promoted to the position of new leader of Xbox. Thanks to Tom Warren from The Verge, we have some new insights now. As per Tom, Bond was not well liked by Xbox employees, and they were not surprised that Microsoft promoted someone else to the top of Xbox, and are in fact relieved that that's the case. Bond was promoted to Xbox president back in 2023 after she had been instrumental in helping secure the deal to buy Activision Blizzard. But then came the whole "this is an Xbox" marketing campaign, which revealed Xbox's strategy to expand Xbox into more than a piece of hardware, but rather a platform that can be accessed by a computer, a phone, a tablet. Anything's an Xbox. Even my Texas Instrument TI-30X is an Xbox. It's got the X right in the title. Now, this direction may have been set by Spencer, but Bond became the champion of the initiative. And this may be hard to believe, but all the hardware people at Xbox who, engineered the Xbox, they took offense to this campaign. The strategy allegedly has been seen as a failure internally, that by trying to reach new customers who do not own an Xbox, they've neglected to properly serve existing Xbox customers. The new Microsoft Gaming CEO, Asha Sharma, is now promising the return of Xbox. Now, when Phil Spencer's retirement was announced last Friday, Asha Sharma, Microsoft boss Satya Nadella, and Microsoft Gaming Executive Vice President Matt Booty all had great things to say about Spencer, but they didn't even mention Bond at all in their messages. Only Spencer mentioned her in his retirement message. And apparently the original plan was to announce the retirement on Monday, but when they learned that a news outlet had gone a leak and was going to run with the story on Friday, Microsoft decided to pull the trigger early. So much so that even Sarah Bond was blindsided by this, with her message only coming hours after the announcement and not being part of the main Microsoft blog. So definitely feels like there was some bad blood there. Then in another follow-up story, we got some extra details about the closure of Sony's Bluepoint games, courtesy of a scoop by Jason Schreier. After the live service God of War game was cancelled, Bluepoint pitched something they would have been a perfect fit for, a remake of Bloodborne. But Sony said that, while the numbers made sense, From Software, the original devs of Bloodborne, did not want anyone touching Bloodborne. Now, last year, a PlayStation executive had shared a theory in an interview with Kinda Funny Games that From Software's president, Hidetaka Miyazaki, wanted to remake Bloodborne himself, but had been too busy to do it, and he didn't want anyone else touching the game. The executive said that Sony would respect Miyazaki's wishes, even though they're technically the owners of the franchise and can do whatever the hell they want. Miyazaki has publicly expressed how much of himself he poured into Bloodborne, so it does sound like the game is very much his baby, and it makes sense that he'd want to handle the eventual remake himself. I just wouldn't count on that happening anytime soon. Anyway, after the Bloodborne remake was shot down, Bluepoint pitched an updated version of Shadow of the Colossus, but Sony turned that one down. They tried pitching other new games, like a spin-off to Ghosts of Tsushima, but nothing got greenlit. And once Sony announced their plans to remake the original God of War trilogy without their involvement, a lot of people at Bluepoint saw the writing on the wall. Now, folks, do check out last week's video in which we discussed Blizzard's approach to more content in Diablo 2. Because that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters who make these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rikers Raiders for more gaming content.